back. Welcome to the 21st edition of the eDuck podcast. I am Robby Boydston, once again chatting with Erik Skopel from Eugene. Erik, how you doing?
Good. Listening to the audio on the first podcast, or the one we did last week, it sounded good enough that we're going to give it another go here via the satellite, I guess, if you will, using the Google Plus Hangouts. Video chat, which is pretty cool. And I do want to say that this is a video, this is an audio, so you guys aren't able to see our backdrops here. I've got a couple of nice framed photos of Oregon football. Robby has an Audrey Hepburn Breakfast at Tiffany's painting on his wall.
I keep it classy, man. I love I apparently love romantic movies from 1961 or whenever that movie came out. But I keep it classy, and you're keeping it with the sports end. So
I hope it's not 1961 and that you actually knew what year Breakfast at Tiffany's came out.
Again, my girlfriend keeps all that stuff around here. It's almost like it's just imparted into my brain, even though, against my will almost, So, but we're here to talk about Oregon football and preview the Cal game. After a bye week, Oregon's back. Actually, Cal had a bye week as well. And they're opening up conference play against each other in Eugene Saturday night at 7 o'clock. It's a late one. But I got to imagine it's going to be a packed house. I know a few Cal Bear fans who are actually making the trip up. And should be an interesting matchup, at least from my perspective, seeing that Cal's bringing in a new system, a new head coach. And it seems like even though their record's not indicative of it, they're playing with more confidence.
Well, and what you left out there was that they also have a new quarterback who's a true freshman, Jared Goff, who was actually the starting quarterback at the same high school that Morgan Mahalik is at now. Well, Morgan backed him up last year, of course. Mahalik is Oregon's lone quarterback commitment, so there are some storylines there. But Goff has been pretty incredible, at least from a yards and statistical perspective. I'm looking at it right here. He is leading the country in yards per game.
Not bad.
I wrote a story today about it on eDuck. It's a quick story. We'll break down a little bit more of what Helfrich had to say as we go on here on the podcast. But Goff incredible numbers here through 3 games. He's averaging 435 yards passing. Already has 7 touchdowns. Now, part of the reason those stats are so significant is just the sheer volume of passes they throw a game. He's attempted 58 per game. In fact, his career opener against Northwestern, he attempted 64, completing 450 yards for 2 touchdowns, also had 3 picks, 2 of which were pick sixes. But that kind of gives you the picture of what Sonny Dykes is trying to do down in Berkeley, replacing Jeff Tedford.
Yeah, and you look at the total offense that Cal's putting up, standing 4th in the conference right now at 556 yards a game. That's not too shabby whatsoever. Of course, Oregon up top, they're averaging 672 through 3 games right now. But both teams definitely have offensive firepower, use it in a little bit of a different fashion. But Goff, has come in and at least from my perspective, even though he's thrown a couple pick sixes and hasn't looked completely sharp at all times, he's got confidence. You can tell Dykes has confidence in him by letting him throw that much, just kind of letting him air it out. And you can tell Goff has the ability to develop into something special a little bit later on down the line, probably in the next year or two, to where he can be a real big threat. And who knows, I think on Saturday you're going to get to see the makings of that because you're going to get his first chance at playing in a very hostile environment. Of course, Cal, I think, opened up with 3 straight home games. So he's going to get to go on the road and get to and see what he's capable of in a hostile environment, a loud environment. See how he measures up, and I do expect him to make a little bit of a noise on Saturday against Oregon.
Yeah, and if you're Cal, you have to feel pretty good here. You've got a true freshman quarterback implementing this scheme, and you look at it down the road. I know probably in the short term, you probably wish you had an upperclassman with more experience, but in the long term, you get a guy like Goff, and you get him 2 or 3 or 4 years as a starting quarterback here. You got to think about the records he'll set and kind of the different levels he'll be at with just the experience he's going to pick up. And, of course, a game like the one he's about to play on Saturday at Oregon, that can only be something that he grows from. And of course, now we probably should talk about the Oregon secondary and how they're going to be challenged. But it's going to be such a great test for California and for Goff, who's, of course, such a highly regarded young quarterback.
Right, and let's not discount the fact that he's played against a tough non-conference schedule. Granted, they did play Portland State at one point, and Portland State gave him a run for their money for a lot of that game. But Northwestern and Ohio State playing two ranked Big Ten schools. Ohio State at the beginning of the season, obviously starting out number 2, ranked in the AP poll there, and I believe same in the coaches poll. So he played against some pretty tough teams. Now, he's going to be going against, like you said, the Oregon secondary, whom quite a few people consider that one of the best, if not the best, in the country. And Cal's scoring defense, I got the stats in front of me. Oregon's defense allows only 9 points a game. Cal sits dead last in the Pac-12, allowing 42 points a game. And they allowed quite a bit to Portland State. So you're seeing already where I'm sure Oregon is finding ways to take advantage of that. And this game could get out of hand very quickly, I think, given Oregon's firepower and Cal's I don't know if it's so much of a lack of an identity on defense or just they're still trying to fill some holes. But as much as Cal can probably go score for score with Oregon for a little bit, it's shaping up, at least statistically and on paper, that Oregon could run away with this game very quick.
Well, yeah, I think you kind of nailed it right there. I mean, it's pretty easy to look at Cal's offensive numbers and go, man, this team's probably undefeated, is playing really well. Well, that's not the case. You look at the scores here. Northwestern beat them by 2 touchdowns. Of course, that game, for those who watched, it was a lot closer than that before a couple of late pick sixes and I think a couple questionable calls.
Yep.
Portland State, they beat them by 7 points at home. That's not impressive, even though Goff threw 485 yards, threw 2 touchdowns.
Right.
And Ohio State, they lost by 18 points, and that game was a lot more lopsided than that until later on in the game. So, let's not ignore the fact that while Cal has scored a lot of points, they've also allowed a lot of points, and they really haven't been all that impressive just as a full team, as a full unit. Maybe you say Goff in the passing game looks good, but I think if you just want to analyze the way they've kind of assessed the way they've played through 3 games, you're probably less than impressed just regarding the whole team.
Right, and this is where a team like for Cal, and again I touched on this a little earlier, that this test is going to be good for them in terms of just setting a benchmark for the future, and being able to look back on this game. And I don't want to speak in foregone conclusions. Anything can happen on Saturday night, but this is going to be a game I think Cal will walk away from and say, okay, this is where we're at now. Let's see where we're at, a year or 2 from now with that system put in place. They'll probably have all the guys they want on both sides of the ball. They'll get away from the nasty end of the Tedford era that just saw just stagnant offense, stagnant defense. And this really is an opportunity for Cal to kind of make some noise. And they've proven in the past that they're not afraid of Autzen Stadium. In 2005, they took Oregon to, it was overtime or double overtime. In 2007, they came up and won. Oregon's on a 4-game winning streak right now, but Cal had a pretty good handle on that series there, probably in about the middle of the 2000s there, and even pushed Oregon to the limits. They gave Oregon its toughest game during that national title season when they made it to the national title game before they played Auburn, almost upsetting Oregon, if not for a missed field goal. So again, there's some intriguing storylines for me that doesn't make this your typical Oregon, okay, it'll be over in the second quarter, you can start writing your story type of a game. I think there's going to be some things that'll keep some people who end up staying up late to watch it, which is going to be a lot of people on the West Coast, not so much on the East Coast, but there's going to be some people there that will probably be drawn in to stay in a little bit longer than they normally would watching a typical Oregon contest.
Yeah, and I think if you want to switch gears, and we'll break down some more Pac-12 games, talk about recruiting later, but if you want to break it down on the defensive side for Oregon, this is going to be a test. And we talked about, I think with the way California has played defensively so far, I don't think there's any question in my mind, and maybe I'll be proven incorrect, but Marcus Mariota is going to have another great game, I think. I think the offense is going to score enough points. But defensively, they're going to be challenged because, like we talked about, that secondary for Oregon, a lot of recognition before the season started, haven't been challenged yet, in my opinion.
Right.
Tennessee, Virginia, Nicholls State. Among those teams, Nicholls State perhaps had the best quarterback. Their backup quarterback is probably the toughest quarterback Oregon has faced so far.
You might, and I think you're hitting that on the head there. Most of the time, where Oregon's defense has been taken advantage of is those short dump off passes over the middle. They try to take advantage of the Oregon linebackers or those little open areas. They don't really try anything deep. Tennessee's big play 2 Saturdays ago, though it went, I believe, for 51 yards, that wasn't a deep ball. That was just something that was, guy got open in the flat and took it for a run with open field. I think you're definitely hitting the nail on the head there in terms of Cal being able to challenge Oregon's secondary a little bit and see really if they're see if they're up for that challenge the same way they were last year.
Well, and I think what makes Cal a little bit unusual or unique, I think, and this is what Helfrich spoke a little bit about today, is that they kind of use that horizontal passing game, if you will, the screen passing game, to set up that long passing game. A lot of teams use play action or they set up the running game, bring those linebackers and safeties up, and then throw it deep. Well, Cal's going to try to dump it off to the side, and that's why those guys throw the ball 50, 60 times a game, is because they're setting up those deep passes with those short passes. So that'll be something to be kind of following during the game and to see how Oregon responds. I think one of the things that I've been really impressed with the Oregon secondary and just with the team in general, with the secondary specifically, is that they've done a great job on first contact of knocking guys back and not letting guys get too many yards after catch. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if I did, I can't imagine that it's more than 1 yard per catch. 1 yard per catch after the catch so far this season. I'd be surprised if I'm wrong on that. It just seems like guys are getting hit for catching the ball at 8 yards downfield and getting tackled at 8 yards downfield, and that's going to be something that's going to be important for Oregon defensively here, is that Cal's going to try to get them out in space, much like Oregon tries to get guys out in space, is making sure you wrap up, take guys down, and don't miss tackles and set up the big play, because if you keep everything in front of you, if you're Oregon, you should be in good shape.
Right, and that also brings to light the defensive line and what a test this could be for them in terms of trying to get pressure on Goff and force him to make those throws that resulted in those pick sixes in those early games. You got to realize he's still a freshman. He's still got things to learn. That offense hasn't been mastered yet. He puts up impressive numbers, but you've got a defensive line that's got some experience on it, obviously, but a couple of guys that could really break out and make themselves impact players in the Pac-12, especially on the defensive end side. And if they're able to get pressure and force Goff to make those throws, that's going to make the job a heck of a lot easier for the secondary and even the guys in the linebacking core that seem to have taken advantage when they needed to, coming up with timely interceptions or timely defensive plays. So far this season. I think the defensive line getting that initial pressure will actually decide a lot in terms of whether or not this game gets out of hand quickly or if Cal can actually give Oregon a bit of a run for its money.
And another thing I think that Helfrich brought up, he said, look, they're going to get their yards. They're going to get some yards. And if you look at the stats on paper so far, Cal has around 1,700 yards of total offense through 3 games. You touched on that number earlier. What was it, about 560 per game?
Right.
They've only converted those into 11 touchdowns. That's a big number right there. If you look at that, it's hard to win football games when you look at Goff's games here.
Mm-hmm.
Over 400 yards in all of them besides the Ohio State game, but just 7 touchdown passes.
Right.
They're throwing the ball. They move the ball up and down the field. It's whether or not they score touchdowns. Part of that's been the fact that he's thrown 4 interceptions. They fumbled a lot. I shouldn't say fumbled a lot, but they fumbled a number of times, turned the ball over. Something that Oregon hasn't done all season.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a big part here. Is if Oregon allows Cal the big plays or allows Cal to move the ball down the field, what's the result of that drive? Is it a touchdown? Is it a field goal? Is it no points? That seems pretty basic, but just looking at the way that Cal has operated this year, it seems like they've done a great job of moving the football, 1,700 yards, but a very poor job of converting those into touchdowns, just 11 touchdowns in the season.
Right. And you know what? I think either way, there's going to be a very animated Nick Aliotti after the game and post-game press conferences.
That's a guarantee after every game, though, Robbie.
That's true, but I want to hear what he says. With Helfrich saying they're going to get their yards, I'd like to know Aliotti's comments to that and what he thinks about the defense there, because I I think you're going to get some interesting comments post game whether or not Cal scores a bunch.
Yeah, so maybe that's a warning to the Oregon fans on the message boards. I'm sure you probably won't heed my advice here, but there might be Oregon might give up more yards than you'd expect them to, but you can't, and analyze the way they play based upon the score of the game, not the number of yards given. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. I think a lot of people get hyped up on certain stats that aren't really reflective of the final result. And, what's more reflective of the final result than scoring and points? So if you're an Oregon fan, I think, like Helfrich said today, they're going to have yards. They're going to move the ball. It'll come down to forcing turnovers and hopefully holding them to 3 or nothing on those drives.
Right. So let's throw out our predictions here for the game. I got 2 questions for you. First, a score prediction, and
Okay.
will Oregon will we see a Jeff Locke or Jake Rodriguez appearance?
So basically, will it be a blowout? Is what you're asking?
Exactly.
Or will Marcus Mariota go down? That's
meaning complete the entire game, not get injured.
That's correct.
Right. Yes.
You want me to go first? Is that how we're going to do this?
Yep. Yep. You throw yours out, I'll throw mine out.
I see how it works. I'm going to say, based upon the way that California's defense has operated and the way Oregon's offense has operated through 3 games, and the fact that we're coming off a bye week, so I think these offenses, everybody's relatively healthy. There's not a lot of guys who will be held out. I think Oregon will score 55 points.
Okay.
I think Cal will score 31.
Okay.
And I think 14 of those will come after the third quarter. So I think.
All right.
I think through 3 quarters, I think it's going to be 48-17. Then maybe we see Locke in the fourth quarter. I think we will see a little bit of Locke. I'm not sure we'll see Rodriguez.
Right.
Because I think they'll probably bring Locke in for maybe one series late. But I'm not sure that we'll see Rodriguez, and I don't know if we'll see Locke either. I think they're going to win fairly handily. Like I said, I mean, it's funny because you say, I'm predicting they're going to win by 24 points, and then people out there are going to say, well, that's not winning by very much. Well, that's basically 4 scores worth. But, I think they're going to – I don't think it's going to be – I think it's going to be more challenging than some people predict. I think the opening line was 33 points, which to me seems a little bit high considering kind of the background with these 2 schools and the way that Cal has scored the ball so far.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't foresee it being a game where you're really sweating, late into the game, late into the fourth quarter.
And I agree with you from that standpoint in terms of, I don't think Oregon fans are going to have to sweat it out. I think after the Tennessee game and seeing that they could go almost practically an entire quarter without scoring a touchdown, and then by the end of the third quarter they had over 50 points.
Yeah,
that just shows how scary this offense really is against. And then Tennessee early on in that game defensively was dominating Oregon. So I think given the fact that Cal's defense isn't anything like Tennessee's, I think Oregon could make it to past 60. So I'm going to say they get 62. I'll say Cal ends at I'll say it's a 62-28 score.
You almost put it in triple digits there with the total score, huh?
Almost, but I think just based on what I've seen on paper, I've seen a little bit of Cal play. I like what I've seen. I agree with the fact that when you saying that they're going to get yards. I think they will be able to score because again, I think they're just like one of those teams that does not get intimidated by coming to Eugene. They don't buy into it. I'm sure Sonny Dykes doesn't buy into it, but I still just can't get past the fact that Oregon's got a very good secondary. Despite Goff's gaudy numbers, I just saw on the statistics sheet here, he's actually towards the bottom of the 12 starting quarterbacks. He's towards the bottom in terms of passing efficiency. And I think they're going to be able to force him to make a few mistakes. I think Oregon's going to be able to jump out to a big lead over that Cal defense. And if they get into a rhythm, it can become a bloodbath pretty quick.
Okay, I mean, I think we kind of agree then. I mean, it's fair to say.
I think we do, yeah.
We think both sides are going to score some points. We think Oregon's going to score more. We think Cal will probably convert some touchdowns just based upon sheer volume. You run 80, 85 plays. You figure you're going to score 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're kind of on the same page here. We want to move forward and look at the rest of the Pac-12 this weekend.
Yeah. Here, I've got the rest of the schedule up. Oregon and Cal won of looks like 5 games this weekend out of the Pac-12. Eric and I will just go back and forth here and kind of give our thoughts on the matchups and give a quick score prediction for you. Let's start with the 12 o'clock game on the Pac-12 network. Oregon State returns home after a close one with San Diego State to face a undefeated Colorado team, which is odd to say.
Yeah, I think that's been something that's not really been talked about so far. Is that Colorado has looked really, really good. Granted they haven't. They're 2-0, so they've only played 2 games, which is interesting. Oregon State is going into their 5th game. Of course, Colorado was held out because of they postponed that game with Fresno State, which you look at and you say that's probably perhaps a loss the way that Fresno State has played, because of the flooding. They had to postpone that game, but beat Colorado State, who's usually pretty good, and then they squeaked by Central Arkansas. So undefeated but not really tested. Come up to Oregon State. I think Oregon State, boy, they haven't looked good so far. I think this is a closer game than you expect. I'm gonna give Oregon State the edge just because they are playing at home. With that said, I don't think it's real one-sided. I think it's gonna be pretty high scoring because I'm not impressed with either side's defense at all so far.
No, and there's no reason to be.
No, there hasn't been anything that should be impressive. I mean, Oregon State couldn't stop Eastern Washington. Oregon State couldn't stop Utah. Oregon State couldn't stop San Diego State. Hawaii even tested them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with Oregon State 41. I think they're gonna miss an extra point apparently. I'm gonna go with Colorado 29. They're gonna go for 2 or something.
Oh, okay, all right. So yeah, maybe a late score and trying to get back in the game there. I can't add much more to that. I think you're right on the money with. The fact that neither defense has looked very good. I will say that Oregon State, despite that, has shown that they can overcome it. They've got a little bit of the Phoenix Suns syndrome in that they don't really play defense, but as long as they've got Mannion and Cooks out there running around or being able to have that 1-2 connection right there, they're going to be at least able to hang into games. I think Sean Mannion really has shown that he's grown as a quarterback given everything that happened last year. And given the fact that, he's had a turbulent couple of years there at Oregon State, and he looks like he finally has a firm grasp of that starting job. He's topping 400 yards passing, it seems, routinely. And Cooks is seemingly always hanging around like 170 to 200 yards receiving a game, which, it's just gaudy numbers when you consider that they had, Marcus Wheaton there last year, and he was a heck of a weapon as well. So Cooks has really stepped it up. I think Oregon State wins a close one because they can't seem to not play a close game. So I'm going to go actually with a 28-25 score. I'll keep it within a field goal.
A little respect for those defenses, huh?
I think, you know what, I think that's probably something both teams are focusing on, and I think that I just think Oregon State's aerial attack is going to be a little bit too much, but at the same time they're prone to mistakes. And I think maybe more mistakes are going to be the reason why that score stays a little bit low.
Colorado hasn't played a football game in 3 weeks. That is something to bring up here. They played Central Arkansas, but that was basically been a 3-week bye here to prepare for Oregon State. So do consider that. They've had a lot of time to kind of set up and figure things out. Now let's move on to Arizona and Washington. And now if you look through the last 6 years, the home team has won each game. Arizona and Washington both undefeated right now. Washington, number 16 in the country, have looked, I think, like maybe the second or third best team in the conference so far. Just offensively, they've kind of adapted themselves and are playing similar to the way that Oregon plays. And of course, they'll say that that's because they've emulated Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M, but that's probably beyond the point.
I just want to know how many Oregon fans out there are actually would admit that Washington has shown that they've improved.
I think some would. Objectively, they're 3-0. They beat Illinois on the road. That's a challenging game, and they beat the crap out of Boise State and beat the crap out of Idaho State. Now, I know that that non-conference schedule, Boise State I think is down. Illinois is probably not as good as you'd think, but Washington's definitely improved, and I really do think they'll contend for the Pac-12 North crown with Oregon and Stanford. I think they'll probably finish third. I think they're just a step below those two schools. But I think Washington's on the up and up right now, honestly. And I know that's not a popular opinion on an Oregon website, but there's a lot of attractive things about the University of Washington. And I don't see them, staying in the bottom half of the conference or staying at that 7-5 record, which is where they've been the last 3 or 4 years. I see them improving and eventually, becoming a team that wins a conference championship. However, you look through, like I said, these teams have played each other the last 6 times. The home team has won. But you also look at the margin of victory in those games, and when Washington has hosted Arizona, they've won by a touchdown or less each of the last 3 times. When Washington has gone to Arizona and Tucson has beaten Washington by 5 touchdowns or more. So
a little lopsided.
A little lopsided, yeah. I mean, they've all been like 48-34, 52-17 scores. With that said, I kind of think I'm going to go Arizona here. I know it's probably surprising after I just built them up, but I really have been, and we talked about this before the season, very, very high on Rich Rodriguez and what they're doing down at Arizona. I know the defense is a bit of a question mark, but I think Kadeem Carey, to me, is the best running back in this conference.
Well, and don't count out Bishop Sankey though. He's been tearing it up a little bit here in the opening.
Kid, man, he's a Gonzaga prep kid. I saw him play every Friday.
Exactly. So I know you got to love him. So now this is what's funny to me is that this seems like the game that if in the past Washington's gone into where it looks like okay they're finally going to get over the hump and then inevitably the loss comes and they're back where they started at that like you said that 7-5 level. I'm going to take Washington here because I think that the renovation, the effort they're putting into kind of not exactly reimagining the football program, but just putting a little bit more emphasis on that home field advantage with that renovation. The fact that everybody just seems to be riding really high in that program. There's a lot of confidence, and they're backing it up this season thus far. I just don't see. Again, it's close. It's a toss-up game. I like Arizona as well. I like Rich Rodriguez. But I think Washington finally overcomes that dreaded bump and takes this one. And I think it'll be close. We'll go 24-21 game. But I think you're going to get some drama late. There's going to be a defensive stand. And Washington's finally going to defend their home field. And like you said, I think that they're going to be hanging around for a little while and possibly even build up that Oregon-Washington contest here in a few weeks as being a marquee matchup.
Did I give my score update?
I don't think you gave a score on that.
I think you did. I'm going to say 41, 35.
Okay, all right, another close one.
Wildcats.
All right.
Let's move on to the fourth of 5 games. This is the first of the 3 7:00-ish games. Of course, California, Oregon at 7:30, and USC, Arizona State. The nightcaps there at 7:30. California going up to the Palouse. Actually, they're going to Seattle. That's right. They're not actually going to Washington State because Washington State decides not to play a home game, decide to move it to a more neutral location just to make things more challenging on themselves.
No, man, they're trying to keep that bad karma of Stanford going up to Washington last year and playing in that stadium and losing. I think they're just trying to repeat that.
This is actually intriguing to me. I'm not going to lie. I know Stanford will win this game, but for some reason I like the Cougs. I like what they've done through 4 games. They're 3-1 offensively. Like Mike Leach teams, they score a ton of points. Of course, against USC they scored 10, but that defense held USC to 7. They went down. Are you not a little bit impressed with the fact that they're 3-1 this far in the season and really could have beaten Auburn on the road? They've had a couple of tough road tests. I think this could be maybe that's why they moved it to Seattle. They wanted another tough road game.
Possibly. But no, I think that Auburn game really speaks for itself in the fact that I don't know if I really expected them to hang around with Auburn. Now, granted, Auburn at the beginning of the season I probably looked a little bit more down on, but they've actually surprised me a little bit. I liked what I saw when they played LSU last weekend, even though I think they lost by a couple touchdowns. They kept it a tight game. And then, Washington State, obviously the big win with USC, that was huge. Especially for just program morale. Mike Leach finally gets a big win under his belt there. And they showed flashes a little bit last year. I know there was some dissension towards the end of the season with chemistry. But, even against Oregon last year, they made it tough on him for about a quarter and a half. before Oregon really started getting things going in that same stadium.
Yeah.
Say again?
Oh, through the first half, it was a close game actually.
Yeah,
I was up at that one up in Seattle.
yeah, and so I think and given the fact that Arizona State, who got ran over the entire first half last week against Stanford, they were able to show that they could hang around. I think that shows that Stanford's not exactly they haven't fine-tuned everything yet. Now, 3 games into the season, I don't know if you expect them to, but it was a little bit telling that Arizona State was able to kind of go in there and almost make that a game last weekend towards the end. Washington State doesn't have those weapons there yet. Stanford, I think, takes this one by 2 touchdowns at least. I'll say a 28-14 game because I just don't know if Washington State's going to be able to penetrate that Stanford defense multiple times before they kind of tighten up and realize that they are still playing Washington State.
So you're going to give me the chance to pick second for the first time today?
Yeah, why not?
All right. I think this is going to be an interesting game because I think where Washington State excels is where I think Stanford has problems, and that's in the secondary. I think Washington State has a chance to put up some points here. I do think Stanford will win this game. I'm gonna say 38-27, and it's close. It's close until the fourth quarter, I think. And I think Stanford probably holds them in the fourth quarter. I think Connor Halliday has a good game. I really do.
All right. Well, then I'm looking forward to that one. Now, granted, I'm not gonna be able to watch it, but like you said, that's gonna be intriguing. So let's get on to the last game here. 7:30 start on ESPN2 in what could be a interesting little battle here in the Pac-12 South. USC, who still can't find an identity after almost losing at home to Utah State last weekend. Now, Utah State, not a slouch of a team, but still a team USC should be able to beat with that talent. Playing Arizona State on the road. Arizona State, again, made a little bit of a game out of it with Stanford after they kind of woke up from that first half snooze. This really is kind of shaping up to be really a sneaky, really good marquee game for the Pac-12 South.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and it has potential to be, a game that could determine who represents the Pac-12 South in that Pac-12 championship game. Of course, UCLA is probably the odds-on favorite at this point, but you can't sleep on USC. They obviously have the talent. Arizona State has looked good at times this year. I think a little inconsistent. That Wisconsin game, they were kind of gifted.
A little bit.
But USC and Arizona State, they even when USC was competitive was really the class of the conference. Arizona State always gave them a fairly tough game. I mean, you look back through here. They were always pretty competitive matchups, and I don't think that changes again this year. USC, you say what you say about how they played this year, lost to Washington State. That's not impressive. Really struggled against Hawaii in the opener. Didn't look good at all last week against Utah State. They're still USC, and I know that's a cliche thing to say, but they still have the talent, and that defense is still really, really good.
Yes, it is.
I think Arizona State. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game, just because I don't think Kiffin and the Trojans feel like they can win a game that's played in the 30s or the 40s. They prefer to play a game that's in the 20s and maybe the teens. So I am going to take the Trojans here, though, in what I think is probably a relative upset. I think they kind of get it together. I don't know if it's an offensive victory as much as it's a defensive win. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I'm going to go 17-12.
17-12. So 4 field goals from Arizona State?
Maybe a touchdown and a safety.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, and you never know with this USC offense. That's entirely possible, and that's really what the game hinges on for me. Is Lane Kiffin going to open up the playbook a little bit against Washington State? That was a very neutered USC offense, and they've got talented quarterbacks. Obviously, they were 5-star kids. I really think Kiffin is just kind of holding back for whatever reason on letting these quarterbacks actually let loose and see what they're actually made of. To give Sonny Dykes credit up at Cal, he's at least letting Goff make those mistakes that he can learn from and build on. Kiffin really isn't allowing his quarterbacks to do that at this point, and with a weapon like Marquise Lee, who is one of the most physical. He's been touted as the best receiver in the Pac-12 now for a couple of years. I just don't understand why you don't open up the playbook more. If they do, I think USC wins this game by 10 points. If not, I'm more inclined with you to be a closer game. I would say it's like a 3-point game, a 20-17 type of matchup. But I really think USC is capable of putting up 30 points or so on the board, especially since even Stanford was able to take a little bit of an advantage of that Arizona State secondary last week, especially in play action game. So I think if USC just opens it up a little bit more, they have the ability to score points and be a threat on both sides of the ball. That defense has already taken care of a lot of the work for them. They need to figure it out offensively and figure out what's going on there and get past that mental block, it seems.
So who are you taking? Did you
USC. Yes, USC.
All right, so let's recap that. We both take Oregon. We both take Oregon State. I take Arizona. You take Washington. Both take Stanford, and we both take USC.
Correct.
All right, so I guess who wins this week will come down to that Arizona-Washington game. I'm kind of surprised you didn't go Arizona State to make things interesting, but I guess we all knew what to expect from you there, Robby.
Yeah, I'm so predictable. Let's jump
into a little recruiting for a second, and then we'll send these guys off on their way.
Yeah, so real quick, just wanted to give people a quick update on visitors. This is very much as of more like Tuesday night, but here it's Wednesday. Looking at our visitors list, Henry Mondu, obviously we talked about that on the Saturday podcast. He is still slated to come out. Also, Tony James, the running back out of Gainesville, Florida, 3-star, who a lot of people on our boards are excited about. Kind of a different option than Joe Mixon, who's the other running back they're very excited about. Those are the two that are confirmed right now. Of course, we mentioned on Saturday, Micaiah Quick would be taking a test and then coming out to Oregon this weekend. He is no longer on the visit list as I've checked it. I'll check in more to that to see what's going on there. Talk with Greg Biggins to see what the update is there, see if he is or is not coming out. And then keep checking later on this week. We still got 3 days before kickoff. Almost 3 days exact before kickoff against Cal. So keep checking the boards to see if there's any updates with the visit list for this weekend and the visits going forward. Also should mention here real quick, I did talk to Budda Baker, who's a highly touted safety, more of an athlete. He could play both sides of the ball, also a dangerous running back slot receiver type of kid out of Bellevue, Washington. He was supposed to visit for the Tennessee game. His ride ended up bailing. He's now notified me that he will be taking all of his visits after the season, so don't expect as of right now for him to visit any games. He'll probably come out in December sometime to check it out, and then he plans on announcing at the Army Bowl still, which happens in early January. So there's a quick little update.
That's going to be, sorry to cut you off a little bit, Robbie, but that's going to be a bit of a challenge, though, for Budda to visit all 5 schools.
Well, and he's only got 4 lined up.
He's only got 4, but, I mean, he could still take that 5th visit, but it's going to be a bit of a challenge, don't you think, to try to see all those schools in what's going to amount to maybe 3 weeks?
Yeah, and I think it was Hines on our board brought that up as well. He, that it's very difficult for these kids to go back to back to back to back that, traveling across the country. Now, granted, Budda's going to be keeping a lot of his visits on the West Coast. He's not going to be going, jumping back cross country. Washington, Oregon, UCLA, Arizona State, I think, are the 4 they're officials that he's got. And I think if there was a 5th, the school that he has been talking about more and more lately about just having interest in is Texas A&M. But I think the fact that he's leaving them off the list right now is telling that he's most likely a Pac-12 prospect. Obviously, Washington and Oregon, given the location and his talent ability, are going to be very heavy, in terms of just recruiting him because he's going to fit well in either system. Depending on it, and it really doesn't matter what way they use him, defensively, offensively, he's just a threat. I think UCLA is also going to be a fun little wild card to look at, given that his teammate Miles Jack from last year is now down at UCLA, so that could play a factor as well. So keep an eye on that because he is one of the more talented. Actually, he's the top prospect out of the Northwest right now, and to get him, especially given the fact that Oregon's slated to get a pretty deep secondary out of this class, that'd be a big coup for them.
Not to talk about it too much. I know we're probably pushing it here on what we wanted to talk about, but noticed a number of 2015 guys brought up on the message boards. Any of those guys looking to take on officials from what you've heard out to Eugene coming up?
I did talk to one today, Cy Sermon, who his father played for Oregon, now is a linebackers coach up at Washington right now. He is planning on visiting. I talked to him today.
That'd be Peter Sermon's son now?
Yes. And he's going to be visiting he's planning on coming down for the UCLA game. He's already checked out Washington. A little bit of an interesting situation there. Should preface it by saying, because he did make a very good point of saying this throughout the interview, that while his uncle is his uncle, that's not going to play a factor into his decision. Obviously, it's still very early on in the process, but he's hearing from Oregon, Washington, Boise State, among other schools. In terms of, he's just getting letters. Cal's talked to him. Cal actually has sent him an invite to go check out a game as well. He doesn't know if he's going to make that, but he does say that he wants to. He's only been to Oregon for a spring game, and that was a long time ago. So he's really interested to see a actual Oregon game, the real atmosphere, take that in, and given the lack of very highly touted prospects coming out of the Northwest next year thus far, this is one to kind of keep an eye on. A kid out of the Wenatchee area and a big linebacker. Definitely one to keep your eye on if you're looking ahead towards the 2015 class already.
All right, sounds good, Robbie. Anything else for tonight?
I think we're gonna. Yeah, that ran a little longer than we thought, but I think we're gonna let that one. That one end right there, and we'll let Heavy Heaters take you home. Remember, follow us on Twitter at @rboydston_eDuck and at @Erik_Scopel, and I think that does it for.
We will. I should say we're going to be back on Saturday for a post-game podcast to discuss what we think is going to be an Oregon victory, based upon the predictions we just made. But either way, we will be there, and it will be very, very late. So do not. That's just a preemptive apology for what will probably be a very weary pair of eDuck reporters.
Yeah, I'm not going to be home till at least 3 a.m. on Saturday, so expect that podcast on Sunday morning or afternoon. So that being said, for myself, Robby Boydston, and for Erik Scopel here, this has been the 21st edition of the eDuck podcast.
Scopel out.